When it comes to Pokédex categories, that's the Mouse, Rabbit, Superpower, and Ogre Scorpion part of the Pokédex, every Pokémon's got one, and they, like their names, have to be translated and localized. Comparing the original Japanese categories to the English ones, a good like 95% of them are the same, or at least are so close to the same it doesn't really matter. But the more drastic differences between those few, that's what this video is all about. Let's go through the Pokédex and see what we can learn from these bigger differences. Meowth is the earliest example of a really big difference. Instead of the Scratch Cat Pokémon in English, it's the Bakaneko Pokémon in its original Japanese. But the Bakaneko is a yokai or folklore creature in Japan who is a talking cat who can also stand on its hind legs and plays tricks on humans, so that's perfect. But in the Y2K era, even fewer Americans knew about yokai than they do today. So that change into simply the Scratch Cat Pokémon makes sense. Persian is quite different too. Instead of the classy cat Pokémon, it is the Siamese cat Pokémon. Curious that they'd specify a cat breed that it doesn't even look like, but it has to do with some cultural associations with the breed. While in the West, Siamese cats are more so associated with just Asia generally, in Asia itself, especially at the time, the Siamese was seen as a rather high-class, purebred breed of cat, mostly belonging to richer households, similar to how Persian cats were seen in the West at the time. So, classy cat, as well as the name Persian, is a decent localization. Slowpoke may be dopey, but in Japanese, they do not hold back. They just straight up call it the stupid Pokemon. At least they didn't use the more insulting baka. Could you imagine? Instead, the word manuke is used, which is more so used to mean genuinely foolish, dumb, and stupid. Not so much as an insult as much as it's just stating a fact about someone's lack of intelligence. Apparently in Japan, Vaporeon has rabies. It's the foam-spitting Pokemon instead of the bubble jet. Actually, jumping ahead, Froakie and Frogadier are foam frog Pokemon in Japanese, but just bubble frog Pokemon in English. Technically, a bunch of bubbles like this is a foam of them, but in the West, when you say foam spitting or foaming at the mouth, people tend to jump to rabies instead of some bubbly happy guy. So, the word foam was avoided. Xatu is a highly spiritual Pokemon and a mentor to many, so being the mystic Pokemon is fitting, but in Japanese, it is the spirit Pokemon. But fun fact, the word used, seirei, is the same word some Japanese Bibles use for the Holy Ghost, one of the aspects of the Trinity. It's used this way because rather than just being spiritually like a ghost or a fude, this particular word has an air of respect and wisdom to it, like a sensei ghost, a seirei. Of course, Xatu isn't a ghost though, it's just super wise and super spiritual, while being a guide to others. Like a shaman, like how Galarian Slowking is the shaman Pokemon in Japanese, though in English it's the hexpert Pokemon, which I love. That is a pun. A hex expert. A hexpert. Love that. Another related great pun, Copperajah and Cufant are bronze statue Pokemon originally. I guess there are many bronze statues of Indian elephants throughout the world, but the English team made an amazing pun out of it. The Copperderm Pokemon. Copperderm! So pachyderms are animals like elephants, rhinos, hippos, and such, but this elephant has copper skin. Copperderm. Derma, the Greek word for skin, hence dermatology and such. Skincare. Ah! Triple pun alarm! Personally, I love how more recently the categories have gotten more fun like this, but don't think it's the localization team ruining the poor Pokemon categories from their original intent from glorious Nippon, because plenty of Japanese categories have puns in them too. They're just harder to detect if you don't speak the language. But Charcadet's is easy to spot. In English, it's the Fire Child Pokemon, but in Japanese, it's the Spark Pokemon. There are other Pokemon who are the Spark Pokemon, but here, it's specifically a play on words because when you break down the Japanese word for spark, it's literally fire child, which is what Charcadet is, a fire child. Marinie and Toxapex too, simply the brutal star Pokemon in English, but in Japanese, the word for a miscreant, brutal, atrocious beast, Hitodenashi, fits nicely with starfish, Hitode. Their category in Japanese is a pun. Jumping back to Gen 2 now though, Wobbuffet is weird. In Japanese, it's the endurance Pokemon, which makes sense. It can endure a lot. It's literally a punching bag. That's its shtick. But English went and made it the patient Pokemon? Is it sick? Oh no. Oh no. It means that it can wait a long time, which I guess? An odd choice though. And then Shelgon later does the opposite. In Japan, they said, oh yeah, he's patient because he's slowly becoming a real dragon in his dragon cocoon shell. And the American localizer said, oh no, it's like Wobbuffet again. I'd better call it the endurance Pokemon.
So hey, I've been bedridden recovering from the flu, so I've been catching up on some Switch games. Part-time UFO is the GOAT, man. Just like today's sponsor, the NYXI Hyperion 2 joypads. Like, I thought the first ones were good, but these, man, these Hall Effect sticks feel so snappy, and like they were designed for my larger, more adult hands. And the buttons, they're micro switches. Even the triggers, they press all my pleasure buttons. Well, maybe not that one. It's a matter of preference, obviously, but I've always preferred the more responsive snappiness of that, as opposed to the squishier feeling default ones. There's programmable back buttons for those of us who like them, but they're not in the way like a lot of other third-party controllers, so you can ignore them if you want. Same with the RGB lighting, like just close your eyes and it won't be there, but no, actually, you can turn them off. I like it. There's also turbo functionality, so you can save your poor, sick, aging bones from having to button mash, even though I kinda want to because I really like the way these buttons feel. The NYXI Hyperion 2 joypad is available now at the link below. Click it to learn more and help support this channel.
Sometimes Japan is a little too literal with the classifications, like Slakoth is just the sloth Pokemon in Japanese, but that's fine. We've got plenty of just mole, dog, lizard, bite Pokemon already. But English really had to just call Slakoth out like that and just call it a slacker to its face. It's not like it's reminded of that by its name every day already. Sometimes being literal is nice though. I had no idea what Trapinch was supposed to be when I was a kid, and its English Dex category of ant pit Pokemon doesn't help. The Japanese kids all got a straight answer though, the antlion larva Pokemon. Thank you! Same with Zangoose. Cat ferret Pokemon? Like, I guess you could describe a mongoose as a cat ferret, but at least in Japan they're straight with us. Did they not think Americans knew what a mongoose was? Oh, because they kinda don't, because they don't live here like they do over there. Corphish and Crawdaunt got switched around, interestingly. They are the ruffian and rogue Pokemon in English, but the rogue and ruffian Pokemon in Japanese. What? I definitely think Ruffian fits Crawdaunt better since it's so much more violent than Corphish. Cradily is a stone cup in Japanese, I guess, instead of a barnacle. Neither are right. It's a crinoid, which is a starfish cosplaying as a plant, but barnacle is at least closer. The Requiem Pokemon, or the Approaching Death Pokemon. Which is spookier to you? Well, I had to look up what Requiem means already, so I'll go with that one. Dictionaries are scary. A Requiem is music to be played at a funeral or any music played for the souls of the dead, say after a particularly messy battle. It's an odd choice for Duskull IMO, which doesn't have anything to do with music, but as a sort of Grim Reaper ghost, it would certainly approach those nearing death. Japan gets a gold star for this one. Oh no, was I supposed to be awarding whose categories are better? Because I have not been. Here's a question though. Does Snorunt have a snow hat or a snow umbrella? Those are its two categories, and the real answer is neither. It's a Yukimino, which is basically a whole snow jacket outfit in classical Japan. Now, I feel like sometimes the English team were just trying to further justify their not so well thought out names. Like Chimchar is the small monkey Pokemon in Japanese. The whole line are monkeys after all, but in English they named the last one Infernape, and apes are not monkeys, and chimps are apes also, and also not monkeys. So they had to make the next category chimp Pokemon to make it sound like that was the intention from the get-go. It was not. Spiritomb as the sealed Pokemon makes more sense given its lore than the forbidden Pokemon. I don't know why they changed that. And I guess gluttonous is a trigger word in America because Munchlax had to be changed into the Big Eater Pokemon. Magnezone, the magnet area Pokemon. Like is it just in a room full of magnets? Like, what is a magnetic area? Oh, in Japanese, it's the magnetic field Pokemon. Well, why didn't you say so? This category could be seen as a hint on how to evolve it originally. You have to bring Magneton to a special magnetic field to evolve it. The Jubilee Pokemon. I prefer Japan's Blessing Pokemon since it delivers blessings. A Jubilee is a celebration of an anniversary of an event, which, like, I guess it's celebrating the anniversary of a blessing? I don't quite get it, but changing away from blessing makes sense. Since the early days, Pokemon has had a controversy in the West with many evangelicals thinking it's literally Satan, so I imagine the English localizers wanted to evolve any sort of religious-sounding words, like blessing. This can also be seen with how they dealt with Arceus. Originally, it's the creation Pokemon. It is the creator deity of Pokemon after all. But I imagine in the West they didn't want more backlash from saying that this is outright the creator. They are saying God is a llama and that you can capture him with devil technology. So instead it's the Alpha Pokemon, the highest Pokemon, the earliest Pokemon. Alpha, there you go. On the flip side, Unpheasant is the Pride Pokemon originally. The West has some different associations with Pride, so as fitting as it would still be, they made it the Proud Pokemon instead. Darumaka, the Zen Charm Pokemon, is instead the Daruma Pokemon. I understand the change. I doubt 95% of Americans know what a Daruma is before this mon, or after, but plenty of them understand Zen and charms. It's all that relaxation devil worship stuff. Dwebble is the rock in Pokemon, which I don't really understand. Like, the Japanese category of stone hermit makes sense. It's literally a hermit crab with a stone shell. Why did the localizers decide it has a whole hotel now? I like how even looking at Sigilif's original category doesn't help us understand it. Pseudo-bird, or avianoid. So it's kinda like a bird, but it isn't. The Gothitelle line. I'm just gonna plug our video about Pokemon who are secretly cows here. There's some deep Japanese puns involved with these categories, which claims that they are cows. No, really. Watch that after this, it's great. I like how LGM and BHM were both the brain Pokemon because they got like big alien brains in there, but in English they used the word cerebral, because while still referring to the brain, it sounds a lot more scientific, or even sci-fi alien-y. Golurk was the Golem Pokemon in Japanese, and I guess because we already have a Pokemon straight up named Golem in English, they had to change it to Automaton, which it is. It's just funny because Golurk is like exactly a Pokemonified Golem, you know? Why change Emolga from the flying squirrel Pokemon, which is actually a thing and what it is, into the sky squirrel Pokemon? Just why? Now, which sounds better to you? The Bash Buffalo or the Headbutt Bull? Both are pretty fun. Reshiram and Zekrom definitely got their lore and origins across better with their original Japanese categories. In English, we get the Vast White and Deep Black Pokemon. Gen 5 remake names confirmed, but originally they were White Yang and Black Yin, as they and Kyurem are based heavily on the Taoist Yin-Yang philosophy. But there is a lot more to them than just that. Deep lore video about them here. I guess they changed it in the West because, again, they didn't want to reference specific religions. Fletchling is the tiny robin Pokemon. I mean, look at it. But in Japanese, it's the Japanese robin Pokemon, specifying exactly which species of bird it's based on. Slurpuff is the meringue Pokemon. Makes sense. That's what it is partially. In Japanese, though, it's the whipped cream Pokemon, which... well, wait, what is alchemy then? Oh, it's just the cream Pokemon. Okay. I definitely think meringue makes more sense. It's a French pastry dog, and meringue is a very French pastry hardened whipped cream-like thing. Though I'm definitely confused about some of the localizers' choices, like some earlier mon we talked about. Sometimes the categories get specified or changed to better fit with the English names. See Clawitzer, who in Japanese is just the launcher Pokemon, but in English it's the howitzer Pokemon, tying its category into its name origins. But then you get Tyrantrum, who in Japanese is the tyrant Pokemon, so surely they kept tyrant for the English name. Nope, it's the despot Pokemon now. Why change it? Well, I'll tell you why after one more example. Stonjourner is originally the megalith Pokemon, which is what it is. A megalith is a structure made of large, stacked stones like Stonehenge. But in English, it's just a big rock Pokemon? Like Onix is a big rock Pokemon, Gigalith is a big rock Pokemon, heck, Rhyperior is a big rock Pokemon. But consider this perspective. Pokemon is a game with a lot of reading, and its target audience is younger kids. It's intended to be a sort of kids-first, turn-based JRPG, and always has been. No matter what, Pokemon is going to be introducing new words and concepts to kids. And like to an American kid, Stonjourner's root of sojourner is a pretty big word. Imagine them looking to the Pokedex category for some clarification and they see the Megalith Pokemon. Megalith? Oh, that's another big word I don't know. But big rock Pokemon? Oh! Okay, cool! Looking up Clawitzer because its name sounds funny and they see howitzer, that's a new word that they can then look up or ask a parent about. Dad, what's a howitzer? What game are you playing? With this in mind, maybe sometimes they don't want to repeat a word from the name in the category. Tyrunt and Tyrantrum both already reference tyrants, so by making Tyrantrum the despot Pokemon, you introduce another related word to the kid, and one that specifies it even more, as despots are specifically rulers, whereas anyone can be a tyrant to something. I am a tyrant to these ants! Back to the Dex, Sylveon is the intertwining Pokemon. Yeah, it's got the flowy ribbons that twirl all around itself and things and you. In Japanese, though, it's the association Pokemon. Like, association of what? Hello, I'm Sylveon, representative from the Association of Pokemon with too many entries on that one green site. I'm here to talk about some of your older thumbnails. Uh-oh. So the Japanese word Pokemon uses is musubitsuki, which does mean association, but less in the business organization sense, and more so in the relation or connection with sense, which is fitting, as originally to evolve Eevee into Sylveon, you couldn't just use a stone. You had to form a deep bond with it, relate and connect with it, associate. Fun. Togedemaru, the circle ball Pokemon in Japanese. That's fair. Hedgehogs do roll up into little balls and circles, but then English made it the roly-poly Pokemon? You mean like the bugs? Roly-polies? The heck, why? Why not the hedgehog ball Pokemon or something? Does roly-poly mean something besides those bugs? Oh, it turns out it's also a British food, or a sandwich, or an old toy that rolls itself upright. Why did you do this, English Pokemon? Just take this L and get out of my house! Now come back, we're not done yet! Golisopod and Wimpod are fun in Japanese, but first, in English, they are the hard scale and turn tail Pokemon, so a kind of armor, and the fact that it runs away quickly. But in their original Japanese, they both have the same category actually. Soko, which depending on how it's read, has different meanings, so it's a pun. One meaning is armored, Soko, and the other is hurrying or moving quickly, Soko. Very fun, love that, but Solgaleo and Lunala. In the original Japanese, they are simply the Sun and Moon Pokemon because they are the Sun and Moon Pokemon, the box legendaries of Sun and Moon. But then the English team had to go and add some E's and N's. Oh, it's the Moony Pokemon and the Sunny. I guess they wanted to be fancy. But actually, it turns out these are just obsolete Old English spellings for Sun and Moon. I suppose the reason they'd want to use those is to show just how old and ancient these Pokemon are, which is a cool goal, I suppose. Allotriophage! Now there's a word I don't know. Can you guess which Pokemon is the Allotriophage Pokemon in Japanese? It's Guzzlord. An allotriophage is a person who experiences intense food cravings that are strange and perhaps foreign, craving things that don't belong, like, gosh, I could sure go for some pickled nails right about now, and a cheeseburger with a bar of soap instead of meat, or like that guy who ate an entire airplane. Yeah, that happened. This time I like the English category more. Junkivore. You read it and you understand it. It's like an herbivore, but for junk. It's literally a trash compactor monster. Squave is actually really fun. So in Japanese, it's simply the stuffed cheeks Pokemon, because it's a squirrel and that's what they do. But in English, they had fun with it. It's the cheeky Pokemon, since cheeky has a double meaning here. Oi! It's a squave! So cheeky Nando over here, trying to steal my roly-poly. Applin's original category explains it better. It's apple living. It's living in an apple. In English, it's the apple core Pokemon, which, wouldn't that just make it the apple? In Japanese, Dreepy is the reproachful Pokemon instead of the lingering Pokemon. So I get that it lingers around. It's a ghost. That's what they do. But I had never thought of it being reproachful or hateful or bitter. All meanings of the word uremashi, but that said, the word does have a ghostly connection. Uramashiya is a phrase commonly said by ghosts in Japan when they first appear, kind of like just boo in the West. Though it does have a more specific meaning. It's said that the word itself puts a curse on the person they are appearing before. In a way, they are saying, I am angry, hateful, and bitter at the world and my untimely death. I will have my revenge, have a curse. And they say it all with Uramashiya! Cub and Urshifu are the Wushu Pokemon in English, Wushu being Chinese for Kung Fu or just martial arts in general, but in Japan they are the Kenpo Pokemon, Kenpo being specifically Japanese-style Kung Fu, essentially. Good old Japanese disdain for China to this day. Overquill, I've learned a lot from. In English, it's the Pin Cluster Pokemon, which makes sense. It looks like a cluster of pins with a fish in the middle, but in Japanese, it's the Kenzan Pokemon, which literally translates to Sword Mountain, but is also also this object, which is used at the bottom of Ikebana flower arrangements. And they definitely do not look like something you'd want to step on. They are also known as flower frogs, which might be important given how Overquill is extremely toxic like mini poison dart frogs. Pawmot is the hands-on Pokemon because it wants to put its hands on you. That's where it zaps from. In Japanese though, it's the treatment Pokemon because its hands are like a defibrillator. It's gonna give you electroshock therapy. Scovillain and Capsakid are the spicy pepper Pokemon, but the Japanese category specifies that they are the habanero Pokemon. I like what they did with Veluza. In Japanese, it's the detachment Pokemon because it's able to detach parts of its body sashimi style. In English though, it is the jettison Pokemon, which is specifically when a boat or ship detaches and drops off a bunch of stuff. So the same meaning, but with an extra aquatic boat-themed flavor. And lastly, a fun fact. Did you know that Scarlet and Violet on its own broke the record for the most common Pokemon category? It's Paradox Pokemon. All of the Paradox Pokemon are the Paradox Pokemon in both languages. Before this game, Dragon and Mouse were tied for first, followed by Fox, Mushroom, and Poison Pin, interestingly enough. And it's also definitely interesting seeing the Pokemon who share the same category with each other. Maybe we'll do a video about that soon. If and when, that'll be here for you. And if you'd like to see your name up on screen right here, right now, please consider supporting us on Patreon or join us as a YouTube member. Your support is what keeps us going. And as always, never stop using your noggin.